the conversation with Alexander Kluge on the occasion of the 2007 exhibition at the Serpentine Gallery in London, when a surprised Kluge asked why de Man himself did not want to see the grotto here, which he had seen on a postcard, and reconstructed from that postcard using tons of paper and specially designed computer programs. De Man said, I quote, "I'm at the end of a whole chain of pictorial woes. All my experiences, everything I am basically, is largely the result of things that have been handed to me. An image reaches me in all sorts of ways. It can come from advertising, from a film, but basically I know it. Although I was never in that grotto, I know it. Ultimately, the process radiates onto the original photo. The things that can be seen in my photographs can be recognized elsewhere, and vice versa." So this is a series he did on this grotto, which is in southern Italy, which apparently he never visited. I don't care if he visited or not, but he did not. And which he reconstructed partly one-to-one. And it's the only work which he did not destroy and spread afterwards. And everything is done by layered paper.
What kind of person is he?
Thomas de Man? I have no idea. What do you mean, what kind of person?
I think he's psychotic, has some serious mental.
No. I really...
How did you get that out of that?
What do you mean?
How did you get some closest out of that?
I don't know. Tricky question.
No. I have no idea. I wouldn't comment on the personality of Thomas de Man. He was trained as a sculptor at the academy in Munich. But I have no idea. No. So here you see, this is in of Serpentine Gallery, a view. If one wanted to write a new dictionary of commonplaces in the style of Flaubert, you could easily fill a book with statements honoured by de Man, as well as honoured by Gursky. The directions for such a book would be given by the following, quote, "Thomas de Man has a unique approach to photography," or "It is a type of photograph that captures what no one sees. There's the talk of the gradual retreat of events from the world of facts. The neutral aspect of the works, that expressionlessness, is being constantly underlined, as if this were all about Rob Grillet's Nouveau Roman in the 50s, which you may be familiar with in the French literature, the Nouveau Roman in the 50s, Rob Grillet, Nathalie Sarraute. So this idea of the emerging world in a pure description, which mainly Rob Grillet brought up. And it is this correctly insinuated expressionlessness that misleads commentators into filling it in so to make an expression, into narrating these stories and anecdotes on which de Man's works are based. The romantic device of ekphrasis in art criticism did not name the artwork. So, we're talking about the German romantic criticism in the beginning of the 19th century, on which Benjamin wrote his PhD on the romantic art criticism. So Novalis, Schlegel, and others in Germany, where the art criticism, of course, was conceived completely different, because it was the idea coming out from the 18th century to mediate the work of art, but never to consider the work of art to be accomplished. But it's on its way, and with the ekphrasis, with the writing, it comes to somewhere. So the romantic device of ekphrasis and art criticism did not name the artwork, even less so its origins, but instead continued it. As Schlegel put it, criticism will complement, rejuvenate, reshape the work of art. These days, criticism recedes behind the work, so to speak, and it is satisfied with the transatlantic consensus on the spectacular and specular in these images. Thomas Demand models the historical reference, claiming the historicity of the constructed. It was Baudelaire who, a century and a half ago, referred in his Saloon of 1859 to history painting as bric-à-brac, or junk, in which the scholarly had to disguise the absence of imagination. History painting was a painting by topographers that, on closer inspection, suggested fake or insignificance. In the expansive course of industrialization, the history painting was replaced as early as 1859, only 20 years after its invention, by photography, with its particular relation to time and indexical trace. And again it was Baudelaire who in 1859 took photography up on its promise for history, for bearing witness, and against art. In art historical terms, Courbet's Boreal in Ornans of 1846, or Manet's Dead Torero of 1864, can qualify as the painterly passing of the history painting in the deliberate trivialization of the historical event. Let me see if I have this here. No, I don't think so. Picasso's Guernica was still to offer an attempt, born of despair, and Gerhard Richter the negative apotheosis in 1988 in the form of the implicit question about painterly autonomy and photographic reference in his cycle on the dead RAF terrorists, which you know or not. Richter's cycle on the RAF, which I may, it's very hard to show this on such a screen. But I want to, let me see if since it situates better, I think I want to show it to you. You know this cycle that Richter painted in 1988, and which is at the MoMA, and which for Richter certainly was who considered himself, Gerd Richter, always as a photographer. Of course, he's not a photographer, as we all know. But he used all the press photography, specifically of the death in Stammheim, Stuttgart Stammheim, when in 1977 the three bodies of Andreas Bader, Gudrun Enslin and Jan Karl Raspe were discovered in the cells of the Stammheim prison, and they were dead. And you may know or not, at that time the question was very open: had they committed suicide or had they been murdered? And it has never been really resolved, absolutely resolved. And Richter made this extraordinary cycle based on photographs, and then he made his black and white paintings, and he re-photographed the paintings, and then on the rephotographed paintings, he made new paintings and had a permanent cycle of if you like, of approaching and distancing from the event. It's a permanent movement. This is why in a new installation of this whole cycle, which was unfortunately sold to the MoMA in the late 90s, he added to the whole cycle, which I briefly will show you here, 10 huge glass plates, which were in the exhibition room, first time exhibited in Dresden. He just put on the wall, just very thick, very high, 2 meters 50 high, and brought 2 meters wide, thick glass plates, which were just nothing. I don't know if you can, well, it's very bad, I'm sorry. What should we do this?
Should we turn this light on?
Well, it's not the light, it's you know, such a bad read. So what you see, of course, the photograph, what you see here is the photograph of this, what do you call it, the cell of Hubertus and her library. And this is the record player where a gun was hidden in it. This is the gun. This is the Boreal, the Stammheim. This is in front of the prison. This is Andreas Bader. This is the photograph. And I don't want to show the photographs. Compared to the work by Gerd Richter, unfortunately, one compared de Man's work, which I have to find, which is called The Bathroom, to this cycle by Richter. This, de Man's work, The Bathroom, is said to examine, I quote, without the ideological pathos of the history painting, the state of things, so to speak, by way of simulations, end of quote. it is interesting to relate these simulations, so-called simulations, to the repression of historical memory, specifically in German art. Banality as a condition for a sort of psychic anesthesia, as Benjamin Buchloh stated for Richter, who of course, and still today, is searching all on the contrary to seize the beauty of a banal photograph by the enclosed possibilities of becoming, almost, in fact, messianic, related to Richter's RAF cycles. The work Demand, called The Bathroom, takes probably something you don't know, or you may know, only in German press socialization, one knows this, was in, I even forgot one, in the end of the 80s, when the former Prime Minister Minister President of one of the lands in Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, he was found dead in a bathroom in a Geneva hotel, Hotel des Bleus. And it was not clear whether he suicided or whether he was murdered. And it was a huge scandal because, I still have to explain, he was dealing with weapons before, and so there were some conflicts, let's say. And a press photographer of a journal tablet, Der Stern, went into the hotel room of Barschel, this minister president, and took this photograph. Of course, in the original photograph, you see Barschel lying in the tub, dead, which was then published on the front page of this Stern magazine and brought up a big scandal at that time. And you have here, and we can come back to this later, you have all the tension between Gerd Richter's work on the tentative to seize an historical moment, and this work, very clean work by Thomas Demar, related to a complete banalization of history. A few years after Baudelaire bade farewell to history painting, Nietzsche published his polemic, in German called Vom Nutzen und Nachteile der Historie für das Leben, in 1874, on the use-abuse of history for life. In it, Nietzsche distinguishes, with a view to history, between three forms of historical observation or artistic work: the monumental, the antiquarian, and the critical kind of historical approach. The monumental attitude refers explicitly to the past, which is worthy of imitation, even if, as in the debate between the ancients and the moderns we mentioned yesterday, it is also unattainable because it is past, or seems unattainable in its perfection. Nietzsche says, I quote him, "As long as the past must be described as something worthy of imitation, something that can be imitated and is possibly a second time, so long, at least, is the past in danger of being distorted, of being reinterpreted according to aesthetic criteria." End of quote. And Nietzsche adds, that art can be beaten to death by art. That art can be beaten to death by art. And those monumentals may well have as their motto, let the dead bury the living. As we know, a century later, Baudelaire implicitly referred to Nietzsche when he equated the filmic representation of the Holocaust with a repeated annihilation of the Holocaust. Nietzsche refers to that art whose relationship to history was not judging or judgmental or worried, like, for example, the critical art of which Gerhard Richter today would be an example, but instead gathered facts and circumstances into an artwork with great technical skill. The diversity of the historical is subjected to a process of extreme reduction. 60 years later, 60 years after Nietzsche, Clement Greenberg will speak of kitsch. Nietzsche simply says, quote, "For art flees if you immediately spread the historical awning over your deeds," end of quote.
What was the Nietzsche quote from again?
This is for, really I recommend, this is a tremendous book. It's on the use and abuse for history, of history for life. It is one of the greatest books, I would say. Where he asks, how can we seize ourselves in which historical moment? And what are the means, in referring not so much to writing than to pictorial work, of seizing historical consciousness. Just get back here. Nietzsche was indeed far removed, far away from what we call today time, or what we called time-based media. Yet Nietzsche certainly recognized the essential link between the artwork and the point of time, the artwork and what we call contemporaneity. Nietzsche's turn against those historical education constructs which were totally education, image, form, without any demonstrable content. And as he said, unfortunately, only bad form, and moreover, uniform, reminds me of a note by Gerhard Richter, who wrote in his diary on January 27, 1983, I quote him, "Essentially, art always has to do with hardship, despair, and helplessness. And when we take the formal, aesthetic side seriously, as something isolated, we often neglect this content. Then we no longer see the content in the form, but rather the form as that which grasps the content, that which is additional to it, which is worth examining, whereby content has no form, it is form." This is the essential. In the works of Thomas Demand, everything is at peace in the doll's house, and the disposition of each piece of life is totally subject to the control of the theatrically inclined gaze. The world is clean when, constantly retrievable, it is purified of all human misery, and appears to master chaos as a multi-part model than as a photographed image. The whole context surrounding Demand's exhibition is indeed theatrical, to such a degree that we read of the exhibition that I mentioned already at the Serpentine Gallery in 2007, I quote, "Each of the 4 galleries is given a distinctive character through the installation of 4 variations of wallpaper designed by Demand, so that the background becomes as important as the pictures themselves." And which is, I mean, quite surprising, I think, isn't it? Had I been the artist, I had been furious reading such a thing. So here you see this installation at the Serpentine Gallery with the arts and craft design effect that Demand made to the wallpaper. So the background becomes as important as the pictures themselves. Brian Doherty understood the white cube, as we know, at the time as a receptacle for art that allowed the paintings to make an impact themselves against a neutral background. Here the wallpaper becomes as important as the paintings themselves. In a press, here you see some other installations, and the catalogue with the wallpaper. In a press release dated September 16, 2009, on Thomas de Man's exhibition called National Gallery, at the National Gallery in Berlin, we read, I quote, "The National Gallery exhibition is clearly devoted to one theme, perhaps the most important in de Man's multifaceted oeuvre, Germany. About 40 of this artist's works are on show until 17th of January 2010 in the glass hall of the Neue Nationalgalerie, designed by Mies van der Rohe. No venue could be more suitable for an exhibition that presents the viewer with a panorama of nation-related history. Panorama of nation-related history. Then the large glass hall of the Neue Nationalgalerie, which is known not only an incunabula of post-war architecture, I'm still in the quote, but also a symbol of the self-understanding of the Federal Republic of Germany at the former border between East and West. And you imagine that
In the catalogue.
this is in the catalogue, and this was the press release for the Thomas de Man show. And this made me so furious when I read this. Impossible. Because this, it's we are in. Imagine we talked about. If we go back to yesterday, and one reason why Walter Benjamin so much concentrated on the medium of photography was that it was breaking with historicism. It was breaking with linearity. It was each photograph considered as a catastrophe, breaking into any kind of recollecting historical linearity. And then you get this press release at the beginning of the 21st century, and saying that, Germany, in an incunabula of post-war architecture, a symbol of self-understanding of Federal Republic of Germany at the former border between East and West. It's a packed book in a certain way, which of course is extremely, I would say, politically reactionary in fact, and an utmost expression of historicism, what they are doing. And now you see, these are, and it was the end of the quote, these are strangely calculated arabesques. The National Gallery, one, in fact, of the most important pieces of 20th century museum architecture, which opened in 1968 with an exhibition of works, not by any German artist, but by Mondrian, is supposed to be ideally suited for a nation-related, and he said nation-related, not national, a nation-related exhibition. If not a nationalistic, then just an opportunistic discourse in which the artist allows himself to become embroiled through these national images and references to the 60 years jubilee of the Federal Republic of Germany. So this was, the Federal Republic of Germany was 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany was constituted, and it was within the festivities, 60 years Federal Republic, that the National Gallery exhibited, made this dramatic show.
So is the problem here with the nationalism, or the nation, or the artist's involvement with this institution that's celebrating the nation?
both.
Just to unpack that,
Yes.
because the outrage, where is the outrage coming from, or directed?
The outrage, one outrage, my outrage, is certainly the argumentation to have such a, mutilated is the conception of Mies van der Rohe for the new National Gallery, which was a place worldwide. There were only the MoMA and Guggenheim comparable to consider the world art and to bring Germany as a place to welcome the world art in Berlin. This is why Mies van der Rohe constructed this extraordinary architecture. And now it is used for a nation-related exhibition. Then no place would be more appropriate than this National Gallery, which of course falls.
Just on that particular point, it's important to remember that just because you mentioned MoMA, then MoMA was the originator of the 1955 show that traveled to Europe. That was a demonstration of American art and design that changed. It was a game changer. And so this formulation of the mission of the museum to be globalist, looking to receive from the world and not represent the nation, is problematic in a democracy, I would say.
Yeah, okay. This we can discuss.
Would you have liked the show, this is a very earnest question, would you have been less outraged by the show if it had been in the Alte Nationale Gallery?
No.
No.
No. Of course, it's a question, there's no response really, because the Alte Nationale would never do a show. It did shows.
They just did the Berlin Biennial in the Alte Nationale Gallery.
Yes, but there was which was part of Menzel.
Menzel.
Yeah. So it was
That's why I asked.
Which was very strange to me, but it was Michael Fried, I think, who did the show. No. I mean, there's two different arguments. One is really the National Gallery, and I mean, the show was titled National Gallery, so this is the second part of it, and so it is going under the, if you like, the roof of Mies van der Rohe.
But he was just the architect.
What do you mean, just the architect?
I knew that would get a rise. I'm sorry, that was a provocation. He was the architect, he was the builder.
No, well, we can discuss this later. Just the architect, it's great. I'm just the piano player. And the second, of course, is the work of I mean, I'm not. Let me finish. Then you see the arguments that they bring up.
I see that.
And how they. I mean, it's one thing, and how they recuperate the work of Mies van der Rohe, and then of Thomas Demand into this historical constellation they put up with post-war architecture, nationalist. National-related work of art, and the falling down of the Berlin Wall. So it's all packed in one package. What if the artist had not been born in Munich, but in the GDR? What sort of German history is being revealed here? The director of the National Gallery felt called upon to cite Elias Canetti in order to explain the opening work, which you see here, Lichtung, Clearing, from 2003, as an association with the German forest. The German forest, for me to you, is between fascism, one of those strong arguments, the German Oak, die Deutsche Eiche. And so this was the opening image, in fact, and perhaps you can see it. No. Anyway, when you enter the National Gallery. Similarly, after his third try, Demand persuaded Boto Strauss to write the legends for the photographs. To quote the director of the National Gallery again, quote, "For each work in the exhibition, Udo Strauss wrote a text that does not explain the pictures, nor concretize their dimensions, but rather by dint of its autonomy adds further layers and creates new readings." End of quote. It is astonishing how much is actually done to distract from the pictures themselves, to let these disappear, in fact, despite their size, under that wide awning, as Nietzsche said. How implacably, how do you say this? Implacably? Implacably? I-M-P-L-A-C-A-B-L-Y? Implacably. How implacably the machinery works, subjugating the free spirits today as it did the weavers in the 19th century. The exhibition Architecture, so inside the National Gallery, was again designed by the London Architects Office Caruso St. John, as was then in Serpentine Gallery. The pictures are hung in front of large, heaving curtains reaching from ceiling to floor. I don't know how much you're familiar with the Mies van der Rohe architecture in Berlin, which is, you know, the upper floor of the Mies building, who was just the architect, is a complete 1,500 square surface, which is completely translucent and comparable to the Mies, the Barcelona pavilion constructed in 28 in Barcelona, where you have, which is constructed on transparencies and specific view angles. And the architects put heavy curtains into this architecture, as you see here. The pictures are hung in front of large heaving curtains reaching from ceiling to floor. Folds, an homage to Mies van der Rohe and to Lily Reich, who worked with Mies on the exhibition architecture in Berlin in the 20s and the 30s. There's no question that the curtains create a theatricality, so that at the latest here, the questioning reference must be made to demands models above and beyond the public media. So the theater and cinema sets and the architectural models. Think of the statement by Stanley Kubrick. In a movie, you don't try to photograph the reality, you try to photograph the photograph of reality. End of quote. I'll show you some pictures of now, this is from the outside. So you see the, looked through the outside window of the National Gallery. So you see the reflection. In the cases you have the catalog book each time with the text about Udo Strauss. So this, I kind of have this one. This work is called Bonn. It's the German Parliament, when the German Parliament was still in Bonn. This is the artist himself in front of his work, like dreaming to sit on the Chancellor's chair behind him. So those are installation views. The garden beside Thomas de Man's bathroom. In the 60s, Warhol's disaster series was, of course, a reaction to media images already shattered by mediatized gazes, as were, of course, Cheryl Levine's photographic appropriations and, almost forgotten today, Sammy Skoglund's staged photographs in the late 80s. And those you probably don't know, so those are just, those the disaster series that Warhol did in the 60s of appropriating press photographs. Just to contextualize Joseph Kossuth's famous work on the chair, the representation, and the etymology. And this is Cheryl Levine, and one of her appropriated works, Dorothy May, and Sandy Skoglund. The architecture critique Beatrice Colomina has written a clever contribution to demand in the Serpentine catalogue. However, as regards the origin of the pictures themselves, all she does is point to the long tradition of architectonic models. And then saying, he is a modern architect, she writes. And, quote, building become images, and images become a kind of building, occupied like any other architectural space, end of quote. You may remember how 10 years ago the architect Paul Virilio described how the economy was increasingly replacing architecture by pictures and or hiding it behind pictures. But to come back to demand, in an interview with Hans-Ulrich Obrist, he said of the exhibition architecture that he worked with architects like a television anchorman. Quote, there is the TV station, the TV program, its anchorman and the guests. And that is exactly how I looked at it. The architects helped me to go on air in this channel. Nothing happens without my help or without theirs. But the roles are clearly assigned. End of quote. It's like with Teletubbies. I don't know if you know the Teletubbies.
Yes.
Okay. It's like with Teletubbies. They would not exist without television. And today, there would be no television without Teletubbies. With the exception of a few pictures, one is called Raum 1994, I've showed in the beginning. Hitler's, the bunker of the Wolfschanze, the assault on Hitler. The bathroom I showed, the parliament, and here you have a picture linked to the RAF. It was how do you call this in English, Stalinorgel, a dispositif of small rockets, which they were supposed to be used in Frankfurt from an assault by the RAF in the 70s, but it failed. Or Heidelberg, it was in Heidelberg, I don't forget now. And there was this press photograph, and Thomas de Mark reconstructed it here, as you see it here. So with the exception of a few images, and perhaps not even these, the links to German history rank under miscellaneous. Be it the images I'm showing you now, like this is called Tokyo, and it's the bus station where the band called Hotel Tokyo which is a band got very famous for youngsters. And somewhere, I forgot where in Germany, they always, when they were kids, used this bus station to go to school. And at a certain moment of history, about 10, 20 years ago, the bus station was destroyed. They built a new bus station. But Thomas de Man reconstructed the bus station. And this is, in fact, used twice. One is linked to Mogadishu. So Mogadishu, again in German history, was the moment when, after the 77, when a plane of the Lufthansa was hijacked by Palestinian in order to free the RAF terrorists in Stockholm, out of the Stockholm prison. And this was the utmost moment in German history in 77, where there was certainly a kind of turn. And when the plane, which was landed in Mogadishu with 150 people on it, was, how to say this, freed by a German specialist force, which was called GSG 9. The same night, the three, Andreas Meinl, Andreas Baader, Gudrun Engstein, Jan Karaspe, they, the next morning, were found dead in the cells. So there's a direct link, of course, historical link, very important. And this image recalls the Mogadishu plane, the Lufthansa plane.
And that's a model in the one?
It's a model. They're all models.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Always a model. Just go here, see this. They're all models, like all those pictures are trifling. Everything leveled to a construction kit to which either another access or another gaze is provided. As everything goes with the flow of the media, everything is of equal significance. Be it the starting organ in the rough preparation for an assassination I just showed before, or the bus stop where the children of the group Tokyo Band used to take the school bus. To quote de Man once again on his artistic approach, published a few months ago, and now we're here in a few months, pardon me, but here, myself, I'm near to despair. I quote de Man, there is perhaps a similarity with the procedure in literature. So he's comparing his own approach to an approach, literary approach. When Nabokov writes about his childhood, he describes every detail he remembers, but none that he does not remember. He does no research, calls no relative, does not ask what it was like then, but he tries to recall every detail as best he can. So each of these details is also his childhood. End of quote. De Man likes to refer to literature, but I doubt if he actually reads it. How can one be so disrespectful as to make an author, Vladimir Nabokov, who suffered all his life under exile, vouch for one's own work? Nabokov does not research, does not call any relatives. In his book Speak Memory, Nabokov writes, again and again, I made enormous mental effort to perceive even the weakest personal shimmer of light in the impersonal darkness on both sides of my life. You know, he was exiled on his life. And we must be reminded that Nabokov's writings were banned, reading them punishable with years in a work camp in Soviet Union, to say nothing of phone calls. And then it was the late 60s and 70s before a few Soviet citizens, despite the great existential threat, sent Nabokov photographs as fragments of his homeland and of possible memory. Nabokov began to write his memories in America in 1940 without having even a single photo from his childhood in Russia. That demand, he was born in 1964, can dare to make such claims is the horrifying fault of a media determined deprivation of history. Everything is image, retrievable, ubiquitously available, with source code but no origin. Or as Günther Anders wrote 40 years ago, images have become independent, they show nothing anymore, no outside. The real outside only exists inside, Günther Anders said. Or to adapt a quote from Karl Kraus, in the beginning was the photograph, and then the world appeared, end of quote. When Gerhard Richter, in conversation with Robert Stowe in 2002, says that using photographs was the only possibility of continuing to paint, it is quite in keeping with the paradox of a painting that resists the photographic instrumentalization of the gaze. If this statement by Gerhard Richter is confronted with that of Duchamp, who, when asked, you remember, in 22, by Stieglitz what he thought of photography, replied that he respected photography as long as it teaches us to despise painting. Then we have a 20th century range within which art formulated its historical reference, its reference to history. And that's it. Let me show some the rest of those images. No, okay. Archive, yeah. This is again related to the Stasi, to the archives of the Stasi constructed. So, of course, it's a bit polemic, and not a theoretical, but I felt the urge to do so. Being 1.5 years ago, I still feel the urge.
No, I really appreciate this polemic, and my own access point to it is that, well, I have two, but the first is that I thought it was interesting that you brought in the Warhol disaster images, because my favorite work of Demand's, I think maybe one of his best works, is one of the most recent, and it's The Tunnel. The Tunnel, right. In which you have a, at first, seemingly faithful recreation of the same tunnel in which Princess Diana was chased by the paparazzi and died. And this space inside the tunnel was, for many years before the police photos of her death were leaked, a kind of black box space, that one could not actually be inside of this space and this particular time that occurred. So you could only have the monument above the tunnel, right, in Paris, right? So for me, what you can do constructively with an artist like Deman, to kind of subvert these tactics that he uses or impulses that he has towards the archive, is you can create personal miniature destructions into his work. So in the way of the Punctum, I think is a perfect example. I never read Deman's work on his own terms. I always find in his works my own personal. It's not a visual punctum because we know the exact contents of the image are on his terms, but a conceptual punctum that I can place myself into these historical moments, despite the false nature of these reconstructions. That they challenge this statement you had from Laura Mulvey yesterday.
It was now.
It was now, because these are, in a way, they're images of things that it was now, but they're not, because they're not actual indexical images. The second thing is that I think it's interesting to situate his work within what has been termed archive fever and the archival impulse that Hal Foster and O'Queen Ways or people like this develop, which is much more of a larger historical condition that even steps outside the bounds of art, about how do we respond to history and memory and information in a world where there is so much to hold on to or let go of. There's an impossibility of archiving the whole thing, and Weiser talks about Foucault writing about how we're always writing or constructing images from within our own culture's archive, which has become extensible to the point where we can no longer see the horizons of it. It's too large. So you pick and choose. So what Deman has done is he's picked and chosen these moments that to him have this significance, and paid even a greater homage than taking a photograph of them. He's literally reconstructed them to this kind of excessive T, and then I think found the what do you call it? I lost my train of thought here, but I'm wondering, how Demand's work can be situated inside of this archival impulse that has been seen in art in the last 20, 30 years maybe.
And of course, the one of the mostly shown work is the archive he constructed himself when he saw the paperwork of the archive. I agree partly. This is the work when I did this when I did a show on the question of the archive, which was not the archive, was not central, and the show was called Tomorrow Forever, on historical photography and contemporary photography, and Demand's work was in there, and this was 1999. And at that time I was amazed by this work, by the reasons exactly you're saying now. I wouldn't go so far as to talk about a conceptual punctum, but it's the just direction. Because it is within the question of the seen and the unseen. But seeing then, or 10 years later, 1999 to 2009, having this exhibition, seeing how little the work, the way you are presenting it right now, this work is received, and where it in fact did have its powerful impact in the 90s. But more than it went on in following precise rules and precise setup of rules that demand has in 4 or 5 points, what to do in order to produce the image. I got not only disinterested in it, but like I said, I don't have to repeat, I think this becomes then, in fact, really reactionary. Those are the context. Now, for the archival side, of course, what he does with his photographs, he presents all the fictitious side of the possible archive. So when I mentioned yesterday, where I think this is an extraordinary work, complete different Validrat, the way he works with the archive.
It's very close to Nietzsche.
Which is far more close, as you say, absolutely, to the approach Gerd Richter has, to the archive.
Except Richter's Atlas. You know, the project 64 to the present.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah. What do you mean except?
The
Atlas is something.
The Atlas.
Yeah.
The Atlas is, to me, okay, maybe not to me, I'm just regurgitating, is epitomized by theorists as like the epitome of this archival impulse. That he kept these 5,000 images that served as the basis of his work. And it goes back to Duchamp's Valise en boîte, creating a miniature corpus of everything in here.
It goes back far before I mentioned yesterday Barbo.
Yeah.
This is also yeah. I'm not so. But this is, let's say, this is something else. But you said accept the Atlas. Why accept the Atlas?
That Wally Rod's work would be like Richter's work, with the exception of the Atlas, because the Atlas is like the Atlas is like what Richter kept as the bare records of what he was using as his source material. It wasn't an invented narrative. Maybe for each individual piece he used these and appropriated them and made narratives. But the Atlas as its own archive is just something what was meaningful to Richter as a recollection of his.
Yeah, I agree. I was asked to do a show, and we will do certainly, on Richter's photographs. And Richter asked me, well, I'm ready to do this, but how can we show them? So this is the question. And the Atlas is very easy to show, because you can go ongoing, year for year, his thematic walls with his hundreds of thousands of photographs, which you may exhibit without any reference to the paintings, and you can change them. But this is only one of the aspects, as you say as well, of Richter's approach to history and to photography. I remember, either as you have now his paintings on photographs, the stroke, and there we have come to the Punkt of effect, in the sudden. I don't know if you've seen, they're extraordinary works. You can't really project them, because when you see, you need this stroke. So if you said dimensional artist, and you need this dimension, and you cannot project this. Or if you have this 128 views on painting, which he did in Halifax, which are absolutely extraordinary, this fragmentation, black and white fragmentation, and so on. He has a huge photographic corpus, huge. So it's very difficult. But I agree that, I wouldn't compare, saying, well, here's Richter, here's Validrat. But this approach, and then perhaps we agree all, this approach to the notion of archive, the way that Richter again and again goes into his own archive to see what he can do with the photographs, as Valid did at a certain time, to go into the archive, not of his own images, but of Civil War photographs and archives, and then contextualize them each time completely differently. when in a way that you do not, if you do not know about the work, you cannot say, is this authentic or is this real or not real, lie of truth, as we said before. So there's in fact a comparison. The Atlas has this extraordinary advantage that it can never be finished. And this is the problem, or not the problem, this advantage that Richter says himself for the Atlas, that it will be ongoing and until his death, if it can. And even then, it cannot be a finished work.
It's Derrida calls this domiciliation. It's like the archive as a form of house arrest.
Yes.
Like you're almost like arrested to it. And just one last thing I want to throw up. One of the new frontiers of curating, especially for artists you don't like or exhibitions you don't like, is you recurate them without the knowledge of the artist or without the artist's consent. This is actually a very interesting intervention into curating.
Without the artist's consent?
Yes. You could, let's say you didn't like what Richter did with his archive, so you curate the archive yourself. We have all now access in the form of what Keith Stern calls poor images. You know, we have the JPEGs, we have the AVI files, we have all this stuff. So you do it yourself. You reinvent an artist's entire career with no. Yeah. What is the sacredness or sanctity anymore of it?
Yeah, I agree. So, but then you mean you will create the show not with the works of the artist, but with the works you recreate of the artist.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, of course. No problems. This is a great. This is another way of, I mean, this is why I showed Cherry Lime. This was in Image Scavengers. Prim did this show in '79, I think, in Philadelphia, or was it '80? I don't know. With Sturtevant, Levine and others. And there it had a precise, had a political impact, the operation of it, which does not, I mean this is the case, it does not have it anymore now. But this was a kind of recreation with other things.
There's an interesting question raised by the Mies van der Rohe, just to go back briefly to that, which is a phenomenon over the last, certainly 15 years in an accelerated pace of museums devoting huge sums of money to architectural projects that situate in this building, as you described. And there are architects like Frank Lloyd Wright who position themselves as the displacer of art, in a sense that even if the assignment was to build a place for the display of art, instead of simply doing this most effectively for the art, that their signature project becomes the legacy or the situation, rather than anything that would encourage art to be placed in a certain context, and that Demant's response to this is one of submission and complicity. And another thing is, in terms of the archives, I'm very good, we're talking about this at the break, but there are many other models devoid of irony or critical discourse or any other thing that have to do with actually fostering Commonwealth access to images or information, which is what a democracy is based on, or in free society. Whatever you call it, a free society is rooted in information. It's difficult to understand this as a bad thing. What quality is necessary for appropriation, which is possibly extraction or exploitation of what an artist does, or what a writer does, or what any human being does in recording the daily living, that's an ethical question. That's a moral question. And so, but there are means for making visual data available free through the JPEG or through highly compressed materials that insist that the user actually create with them, that they cannot be strictly reproduced in a way that is false to the original. And I think this is important.
Yes. Okay, but first we continue this afternoon,
Sure.
because then I was saying we go with in fact with the archive, and I can show you one work, and this is the work by Victor Bergen. His approach to one archive, and it's linked to Gradiva directly, and then have the question: what happens if we build up our archives, as we do currently? About not everything is legitimate. This is not the question, but where are the references to those archives? This would be one of them. But I agree. Okay.